There's something about beauty that can kind of shock us out of the ordinary or the mundane, and it opens us up to a kind of a hope of a grander vision of what's possible.
Welcome to Matters of Soul Importance, where we dive deeply into topics of both earthly and eternal consequence. I'm Roxanne Solonen, faith columnist and features writer for the Forum, author and speaker. In today's episode, we're going to consider the phrase, beauty can save the world. What exactly does this mean, and is it even possible? Ever since hearing this phrase several years ago, and as our world seems to be becoming more depraved, I've been intrigued with the idea of beauty having the potential to return us to sanity. So in today's discussion, I posed the question, can beauty save the world? To Father Luke Meyer, pastor at Saints Anne and Joachim Catholic Church here in Fargo, North Dakota. Let's take a listen. Well, welcome, Father Meyer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today, Roxanne.
Yeah, I appreciate you being with us today to talk about something I would imagine most would be drawn toward. Beauty. Like, how could we not like that subject, right? But before we go into our main topic, I'm always interested in the journeys of others and how they got to where they are now, and especially someone with a unique vocation like a priest. I'm always curious, like, how did you choose that path? So if you want to just introduce yourself by way of sharing a little bit of your story, you
Sure.
could start as far back as you, maybe as a boy. I don't know when that calling began or whatever, but I think it'll be interesting to hear. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think beauty played a role in my own story and my own calling in a few different ways. I think the first way was just through the natural beauty of creation. As a young boy, I grew up in a small town in North Dakota, in Lisbon, and I delivered the Forum newspaper from 5th grade on, and there was a lot of cold, dark mornings. But I grew to love the landscape of North Dakota, the beauty of the stars in the dark sky. And I remember I loved these early mornings full of the stars and the moon and just the beauty of creation and the silence of the winter mornings delivering newspapers. I think I would just sort of pray and just sort of talk to God in the beauty of the morning, the constellations, the beauty of the heavens above. And then some years I would be out on the prairie farming with my grandfather and my uncle. I'd be driving a tractor or driving a pickup through in the silence through the prairie, and just the beauty of the North Dakota prairie, I think, was always very poignant for me. And just I'd even come back from seminary just to drive grain truck, just to be out on the prairie again. Just the vastness of the North Dakota prairie. It's so big and so wide open.
Not to interrupt your story, but as you're talking, I'm already thinking of things, that crisp air. But the thing is, I think one of the things we yearn for as human beings is to not feel alone. And I'm just imagining you as a little boy and as a teenager, yearning for that space, that bigness, that it's almost impossible to feel alone in it, I would think, even though you could be alone, right? Because there's something so vast, and it feels like something we can reach, and it feels like something that can penetrate us.
Yeah, that's right on. I mean, you might feel, okay, I'm alone in the middle of a field with no one for miles, or I'm alone in the middle of the city street with nobody up yet. But you're not alone. You feel this presence because you're surrounded by all this natural beauty.
Yeah.
But I think a couple moments when I got to college where beauty really pierced my own heart. I think a couple moments. The first was a piece of literature. I remember reading this book, A Severe Mercy by Sheldon Van Alken, and it's sort of the story of his marriage, which was a beautiful story of all kinds of things in his marriage. But it's also it's a story of suffering and sickness. And I remember going to read this book in my first theology class at the University of St. Thomas. I'd go to the leather room, this room that was meant for silent reading only, and it was a very popular room in the library. And I'd spend my whole weekend there reading books. And one Saturday was a beautiful Saturday. I remember the sun shining through the old windows of this old library, and all these students sitting in these leather chairs reading books. And I was reading this story, and it just moved me so much. It was the first story that I think I read that made me cry. It was just so moving. It was so beautiful. It was the beauty of love in the midst of suffering, in this story of mercy. And it was just such a beautiful story, a severe mercy.
Yeah, I've read that. So thankfully I know the reference.
Okay, so you...
Yeah, and as someone, it's about a relationship, and it starts out, they're very centered on one another.
Yes.
Very much so. And so as someone who's married and kind of going through those crosses, the beginning part of it was a challenge for me, because I'm like, oh, they're so focused on themselves to a fault. And I already knew by that time that marriage can't be that way. It's got to be other oriented.
Yeah, and then their marriage opens up to the presence of God, and it has this great flowering, but then there's this great suffering. His wife has cancer, and she suffers greatly. But in the midst of this, all this love is unleashed.
Yes,
and it's such a beautiful story.
Yeah,
he almost loves her more in her suffering, as they're sort of under the divine presence in this sort of new phase of their marriage. That was just such a beautiful story. It just really pierced my heart. I think it opened me to the more of God and His presence in ordinary life.
Absolutely.
Then I remember another time I think it was All Souls Day. I might have been a freshman or sophomore in college, and there was this parish, St. Ignace Parish, that hosted always this big special music and celebration and ceremony and liturgy for All Souls Day, which is a day to pray for the dead. And so the Eucharist is being celebrated in this beautiful this beautiful church in St. Paul. And the choir is singing Mozart's Requiem, sort of in the setting that it was meant for, not sort of in a concert hall, but in a church during the actual celebration of the Eucharist. And I remember being in the line to go up and receive communion and just being overwhelmed by the beauty of the moment,
Yeah.
We're sort of remembering the dead who have gone before us. We're hearing, these pieces of Mozart's Requiem. There's the beauty of the church. It's just all sort of it was all these things of beauty coming together into one moment. And I was so moved by the awe and wonder of the moment, the hope in the midst of the mystery of death, the beauty of the architecture, of the sounds, of the smells. And I was like, where am I? I've never experienced this in my life,
Am I in heaven?
Yeah, exactly. That's what was on the front of the church, Porta Coeli, the gate of heaven.
Oh, wow.
But I remember these were all moments that sort of led me to sort of the transcendent in sort of different ways, and sort of led me to kind of consider, not just what was my plan, but, this beauty outside of me was ultimately the beauty of God, and God, what do you have in store for me in my life? And asking Him.
The topic of beauty, I don't think it's something we talk about a lot. And in fact, that's why I wanted to talk about it. Because it's something that you really can't describe. It's something that takes hold of your senses, and it's really, really hard to describe. It's easier to feel. And so I don't know how much we're going to be able to grasp this word, but in the sharing of these moments, I think everyone can relate, to something. So you were drawn by that beauty that kind of overtook you, and it was like, I'm assuming somehow you wanted to grasp onto that and keep it a part of you didn't want it, you don't want it to float away.
Yeah, it sparked a whole new curiosity, a desire for more of this.
Yeah.
Not just the beauty, but the author of beauty as well. Where's all this come from?
Yeah. Yeah. So beauty kind of drew you a little bit. I mean, that was part of it into the priesthood. I do want to talk a little bit about the transcendentals, because not everyone knows that word, but beauty is a part of that. Do you want to just explain a little bit about that? From what I understand it anyway, and I'm sure there's a bigger explanation, the transcendentals are the main things that draw us to God, is how I view it. But you probably have a better definition for it.
In classic philosophy, the transcendentals are goodness, truth, and beauty. And what makes them transcendentals is these are qualities that all beings share, that transcend the particular nature. So these are things that humans and kangaroos and rocks and galaxies and mountains and artifacts, and they all share these three qualities to some degree. So these are these are the things that all being has in common, and all beings have in common. Goodness, truth, and beauty. And beauty is often the neglected of the transcendentals because it's harder to sort of give categories to, or it's harder to describe in just purely intellectual terms or ethical terms. It's more of a wild card. And so sometimes beauty gets to be the forgotten transcendental.
Someone told me a story of their conversion one time, and I always think of it. She was a young adult, and she ended up going to Europe and walked into one of these beautiful cathedrals. And she was also an art major, and she just dropped to her knees. And that was it. Like that just arrested her to such a degree that she was lured in to the church and to God. And she told it so simply, but it made a mark on my heart as far as what beauty can change your life. So the question we have before us today is, I've heard this phrase, beauty can save the world.
Yeah.
And I remember when I heard it, I thought, what are they talking about? And so I kind of want to explore that, because ever since I heard it, and I know there's some books titled with this and people have said it, I want to wrap my head around that a little bit more, because there's something about it that seems really alluring, but I can't quite figure out what it means. So I want to get a little bit closer to that. So of those three transcendentals, these things that raise our eyes and hearts to God, goodness, truth, and beauty, in that phrase, beauty can save the world, or our question, can beauty save the world? That beauty, the one that you said is kind of forgotten sometimes, kind of rises above it all in this time. I'm wondering, why is that? Why have some writers and speakers chosen to elevate beauty right now?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I know that quote well. I think it's, it has its home in the writings of Dostoevsky. Beauty can save the world. And at first it seems like almost a frivolous claim. Like we need more than beauty. Beauty seems like an extra or a bonus or something like that. Don't we need something more essential to sort of save the world? Don't we need many other things? But I think what he's getting at, right, what Dostoevsky's getting at, is that there's something about beauty that can kind of shock us out of the ordinary or the mundane or the sort of ho-hum of life. And it opens us up to a kind of a hope of a grander vision of what's possible. I think what kind of plagues the modern world many times is we can feel like cogs in a machine. And, it's the same old thing all the time. What role do we play? And beauty kind of, it does affect us in this way. I think Plato says beauty kind of can shock the soul. Beauty can shock the soul. And so I think that's one aspect of it. It kind of pulls us out of the ordinary frame of reference, introduces us to kind of a grander vision of life.
Yeah, and it's something that I don't think, like you said, it's a shock. It's, as I was thinking of that phrase and my surprise about it, I think it's because we live in this world of utilitarianism where it seems like, no, beauty can't save the world. Doing something else can, doing more, making more, figuring things out. And so that phrase kind of, it's like, wait, what? Like something that I can just look at could save the world instead of me having to do this and work this out. Like it just... So again, I'm just trying to figure out, like, that's why it's so interesting, because it seems so contrary to our utilitarian nature and also our nature to think that we're going to save the world.
Yeah, I think that's part of it too.
Ourselves.
I think beauty gets us outside of ourselves, right? Whenever there's something beautiful, it's an object outside of ourselves, right? It's something that we gaze at or something that we listen to, but it always directs our gaze away from ourselves to the other. And I think that's part of how beauty saves the world, is it draws us away from self-preoccupation or this neurotic fascination with ourselves, and it draws us into this sort of gaze of hope and love to another outside of ourselves. Beauty is also something outside of ourselves. And there's all these sort of technocratic projects to sort of have a kind of natural salvation in the modern world, like technology is going to save us, or there's some kind of other great thing that's going to save us. And it never does. And it never does. It sort of locks us more into ourselves almost, or just becomes just another projection of ourselves.
That kind of reminds me of a homily that you gave that I'm recalling now about like this utopia that we think we're going to reach. But it's not the things, there's no perfection here on earth.
Yeah, I think sometimes, that's what defines the modern world in a way. It's this kind of restless search for a heaven on earth, and there was a warning, right, hundreds of years ago by St. Thomas More, right? He writes his book, Utopia, which many people read as a serious attempt at a blueprint for utopia, but it's actually a piece of satire in which he's sort of giving a warning that utopia is not possible. Heaven's not possible on earth. And the moment we try to search for a utopia, we end up with a dystopia. And that's what we see in a lot of our movies and these things like the Hunger Games and many other things like that. There's all this fear of a dystopia because we're trying to make a heaven on earth.
Right. That utopia exists somewhere else. It exists in heaven, I think. And so I think beauty gives us like that little glimmer. And that's kind of why, like, there's a part of us that wants that perfection, right? We're yearning for this perfect world where there's no tears and there's no famine and there's no war. And beauty kind of gives us a hint. And I think that's part of like where our soul lurches, because it's like, like you said, it's hopeful. Like there's something bigger and grander, and there is perfection. And it leads us to that, but we have to recognize that we're not going to get it. We can aim towards it. That's the whole point.
We're going to be drawn to it more than we're going to produce it ourselves.
Right. So you've described a couple of times that you were taken by beauty, that it drew you into the priesthood and into a life centered on God and more. Are there any other examples of beauty that you want to share with us?
I think music often sort of is a part of the beautiful that it draws my heart more and more to God, because our relationship with God is a relationship, right? And a relationship is a sharing of hearts. And there's something sometimes about music and sacred music that kind of loosens so many different movements of the heart to realize that this is, the search for God is not one that's stoic or cerebral, but it's sometimes very much one of the heart. And there's something about music that really engages the heart and the emotions. Not that spirituality is emotion, but it involves that, right? It involves the fullness of the heart.
I was thinking of this morning as I was preparing for this. I had a year-long conversation with a non-believer, and we talked for 6 months, and then we had a blog, and we would go back and forth with our different views. And one of the things that I always think about with that conversation was that she said, I don't like any music. I don't like music. And I came from a musical family. My great-grandma was almost going to be a concert pianist in Chicago, and supposedly I'm related to Bach. I don't know. We're all related to Bach probably at some point, right? But anyway, and my husband's a musician, and we met in choir.
Yeah.
So to hear someone say they don't like music, I just didn't even know. I mean, there's got to be some music that you like, So that was interesting. So in that moment, I wondered. And I'm not saying non-believers don't believe in music. I'm just saying, I wonder if there was a block there. There was something going on within her, and I'm wondering if her, kind of shutting that door to beauty in the form of music was also showing her block to the divine. I don't know. I don't know her heart. So, but it made me wonder about that because I had never encountered that before.
Yeah, music has lots of connections to things, doesn't it? And can really, music is also connected to mathematics, right? But we think of all the different styles of music. A lot of times it's, people really connect with music.
Well, I think we'll take a little break here. And on the other side of this short pause, I'm going to share a little video that our listeners can hear where someone entered into a moment of beauty. And so we'll do that after this little pause. We'll be right back.
Get 3 months of local news for just 99 cents a month. You'll get unlimited access to the news you need to stay engaged and connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe now to get 3 months of local news for only 99 cents a month.
Welcome back to Matters of Soul Importance. And before we return to Father Meyer, I'm going to play a video that went viral after it was shared on the internet in January of 2010. The video shows a vibrant double rainbow and the cameraman's audible reaction to it. So listen to a little bit of this video here.
Whoa, that's a full rainbow all the way. Double rainbow. Oh my God. It's a double rainbow all the way. Whoa, that's so intense. Whoa, man. Wow. Whoa. 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 Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Woo. Oh my. Wow. Woo. Yeah. Oh my. Oh my. Oh my God, look at that. It's starting to even look like a triple rainbow. Oh my God, it's full on double rainbow all the way across the sky. Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh God. What does this mean? Oh my God.
Well, there you kind of get the idea there. Oh man, I as I'm hearing him discover this double rainbow, it was right outside his door, so you can kind of hear his wind chimes going. So can you imagine like waking up and walking out, and there's this huge double rainbow, and it's a beautiful area where there's no obstruction, so he can see the whole thing, and it's lit up. It's like a light show right there, and I think we can all, like, listening to that, we recognize that joy and that wonder and that, I don't know, what was your reaction, Father, to that?
I was just struck by his, his tone of awe and wonder. He was captivated by this, and also he wanted to share it. Right?
Yes.
He wanted to talk about it. That's another aspect about beauty. You see a beautiful movie or listen to a beautiful piece of music or see a beautiful piece of art, you tend to go tell people about it. Not because someone told you to, but because you want others to share in it as well.
Absolutely. About, I don't know how many years ago now, probably more than 5, but I started noticing the sky in a different way. I always liked the stars and things like that, but I started noticing sunsets and sunrises more than usual. And you can see them pretty well here in North Dakota, especially in Fargo. It's pretty flat, so we have a pretty decent view. And I started kind of chasing them because there's some spots where you can't see it. So I would see one, and I would get in my car, and I would take my kids, and we would go and chase down the sunset and find a good spot. And I kind of some of those sunsets, and they're just so fleeting too. That's the thing. Like, you just get this glimmer. And I began to think of them as God's goodnight kiss to me, just this beautiful thing, right? And then it's just gone, and then it's dark. It's just this little flash of beauty, and it's just amazing. And so then a couple years later, my daughter went to college, and she was really struggling and just feeling very alone. And I remember at one point I was trying to help her feel better and help her feel connected. And she texted, she said, I just want you to know that one thing that you gave me that I that was a gift, or however she put it, is that you taught me how to chase down the sunsets, and I'm still doing that. So she had found that to be a delight, and I think it brought her comfort and brought her closer to me in her loneliness, and hopefully closer to God as well. So I just like as a mother, that made me so happy, because I wasn't really doing it to like necessarily show my kids. They just happened to be there, and I was dragging them along on my adventure. But and then my one son too just loves looking at the stars, and he has a wonder about that too. And we found some really cool things where we run outside and like, tonight's going to be a eclipse, or tonight the northern lights are going to be out. Let's go, And we've gone to different places to try to look at those things. And I don't know. It kind of brings me back to my own like inner child. There's something about it, like to just be captivated by that kind of beauty. Absolutely.
I still, sometimes now my thing is I try to do time lapses sometimes with the stars at night when I'm out at the lake or someplace dark. There's still awe, in looking at the grandeur of the world.
I'm kind of nutso too with my Facebook page in terms of I go on walks and I try to capture beauty, and it's always surprising because I can find it in every season. And so I know sometimes people probably, I don't think everyone has to do this. I think sometimes you just need to enjoy something and not take a picture, but I just happen to be a communicator that likes to share, like you said. And so, every once in a while I get this affirmation. Like I have a friend who isn't able to get out very much, and she doesn't get to she has MS, and so she can't walk, she can't get out there. And she has just been so thankful and thanked me for sharing that beauty. So there's something really, like you said about the sharing of it. It lifts our hearts up. It gives us hope. There's something beautiful. You had shared with me recently a document. Maybe you could introduce the document a little bit, and I might read a few little excerpts from it about beauty. So,
yeah, Pope John Paul II was an artist.
Mm-hmm.
He wrote plays. He participated in drama and plays, and his plays are like The Jeweler's Shop and many others. So when John Paul became the Holy Father, the Pope, he called together like a special meeting of artists and gave them this talk. And then sometimes when this happens, then it happens with the next Pope and the next Pope. So then Benedict XVI did the same thing. He called together artists in the Sistine Chapel and gave them in a talk to affirm their work and the great work of artists, which gets squeezed out sometimes in our world. And he gave this beautiful talk, the talk of, Pope Benedict, I think in 2009. His great letter to artists, or his address to artists, is just full of all kinds of golden nuggets on the connection between faith and God and beauty. It's just really great.
Yeah. So I'm going to read a few of these. And he really said that Pope Paul VI addressed to artists. So even before that, at the end of Vatican II, kind of a summation. So that initial one came out in 1965. And he said, beauty like truth brings joy to the human heart and is that precious fruit which resists the erosion of time, which unites generations and enables them to be one in admiration. And all this through the work of your hands. And he's talking to the artists, and he says, remember that you are the custodians of beauty in the world. I love that.
Yeah, that is great.
That really is an empowering statement and an acknowledgement of the contribution that artists make to our world, and that we need that beauty around us. We have a really beautiful church, St. San and Joachim, and we've been enjoying the beauty recently of Christmas, and it's just the other day I was there, and I snuck in from the back. I was going to get some holy water, and I had to come in from the back instead of the front. And I kind of had a moment where I was captivated. It was quiet. Most of the lights were out. There was just a few little lights from the Christmas trees and a few little sprinklings. But it was just the still moment of peace. And I took some pictures because I'm like, I want to hold on to this and share it with others. And
this moment of kind of encounter with the beautiful.
Yeah. It's a beautiful time of year right now as we're kind of just starting to leave the Christmas season, but beauty came to us in a child, right? I mean, is beauty is it a person, place, or thing, or is it all of those, Father? What is it?
Well, I think there's a special place for beauty, right, in connection with the incarnation. Here we have the spiritual and the material coming together in the incarnation of Jesus. That beauty isn't an escape from the material into the spiritual or ethereal, but it's the coming together of these two great principles. And so we see in the simplicity of the newborn Christ child, we see this whole paradigm of beauty playing out, that now that what was invisible becomes visible in the incarnation. This becomes a pattern for understanding beauty then that's in a whole new way.
Right. And, they say, God could have come any way, but he came through a child. And I just think, who can argue that a newborn baby, that in itself, like just any newborn child, like it's a beautiful thing to behold the manifestation of a soul, like that wasn't with us. And now it is. It's like a creation. It's like a new creation that we can gaze upon and delight in and have hope in, right? New life is hopeful too.
Yes, absolutely.
So is beauty something that is objective or subjective? Like, is beauty something we can all appreciate? Is it universal, or is it just beauty is in the eye of the beholder kind of thing? Like, how can we grasp something beautiful? Is it universal?
I think because we share beauty, I think that's already a sign that it's something objective and universal, right? If it was just merely a subjective experience or a private appreciation, you would never share it, like, oh, this is my taste, but maybe not yours. If you see a good movie, you go tell a friend, right? That, oh, you should see this too. Or we think of concerts or, whether they be contemporary concerts or classical concerts, many people are drawn to the same thing. So there is, I think, an objective nature to beauty. But it's also received subjectively. There's almost a certain training in beauty that happens to us subjectively that helps us sort of see the beautiful more often and in more places. I know in classical philosophy, there are always three great aspects of what makes something objectively beautiful. The categories, first of all, of unity, and then the second category think of harmony or proportion. We can think of like the golden ratio as an example of that and other things. And then the third quality of something objectively beautiful is it has radiance or splendor. That's kind of almost that mysterious element. And there is something objective about beauty. I think the great quote that sort of sums up the subjective viewpoint of beauty is, well, art is whatever the artist spits, meaning that it defines beauty as long as it's authentic to the the self-expression of the person making it. Mm-hmm. But I think there's more to beauty than just that. It's more than just whatever the artist spits. There is something objective about it.
The artist can spit something that isn't beautiful too.
Sometimes,
right?
Yeah.
And yet there's this aspect where even art that maybe isn't as beautiful as a rose, say, can still teach us and still guide us to the eternal. There can be aspects of like real life, I guess, real life that maybe isn't always happy and joyous, that can be demonstrated through art, that can still like cause us to think and ponder and yearn for something more. I think, right?
I think so. Yeah. I think back to Mozart's Requiem. That's sometimes a very intense and sometimes sad piece, but it kind of pierces our hearts to the more, even in the midst of the brokenness of things.
What I'm thinking of too is this analogy between, like, say, Mother Teresa, who was this shriveled up little old lady with all these wrinkles, and then you could take a beautiful woman who really is maybe, I don't know, profane or just, not living her beauty from the inside out, and kind of look at those two. And there's something about Mother Teresa that maybe on the exteriorly she's dried up like a prune, but we see the beauty in her soul, in her actions. And so in that way, it can deceive us sometimes, right? The exterior, there's the beauty, there's the outward beauty that is the immediate, right, attraction. But then there's a deeper beauty that everyone can exhibit no matter what, if their soul is in line with God, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Mother Teresa is overcome by love, and that's what we notice in her. And so we see that the primacy of her love is expressed even in the midst of her own sort of frailty as she aged. What stands out still is that beauty of her love, the love of the heart of a saint.
So would you say then, coming back to our question, can beauty save the world? Yes, there's art. Yes, there's beautiful music, but is it more connected to the beauty of love, do you think?
I think so. I think there's something about that, right? The beauty of a saint, right? Someone whose life is possessed by love and self-giving rather than self-possession or self-assertion, and maybe that's getting at, there's something beautiful about, one of my favorite days is All Saints' Day, right? Just think of, it's one of the most diverse days, right, in the life of the church, but it's also one of the most beautiful. You see this sort of diversity of so many patterns of love, but they're all united in this same thing. And there's something beautiful about they're bringing about a kind of rescue mission of humanity through their lives overcome by love.
I think sometimes beauty gets shut out, especially in a world like today that, all worlds, all times have had their moments. But somehow, I guess this question, can beauty save the world, begs the idea that the world does need saving, right? I mean, that's a whole other thing. Like, obviously, if we say that sentence, then we're saying that the world needs to be saved. And I think we see that. We see that we're kind of going into the abyss and that we have to pull ourselves out somehow or be directed to beauty. How can you encourage people to seek that out? What are some tangible ways that we can help save the world through beauty in our everyday life?
Yeah, I think some of it is just having the eyes to see it. I think we're so distracted mainly by phones and technology that sometimes we miss the beauty that surrounds us. And so I think part of it is just sort of that growing in that awareness, being able to gaze in silence or notice and sort of living an undistracted life in a way that lets you be pierced by beauty. You'll notice it when you encounter it, right? But you have to almost give your life space to encounter it. You can't control it. You're not a consumer of beauty in this kind of controlled way, but it surprises you at moments.
I remember going to New York City and seeing people in these concrete places with these tall buildings where you can't even see the sky. And then later thinking about how people kind of discount the middle part of America where, we don't have all the activity and it's just these boring plains or whatever.
Country.
Yeah, flyover country. But I thought how much I would love to take, because my thought was some of these people have lived here their whole lives in this spot on this concrete. They've never experienced a sunrise or a sunset or whatever. And I'm sure there's other beautiful things that they can experience, but how I would love to take some of those folks and bring them, to the prairies of North Dakota and share the starlit lit night, and in the sunsets and whatever. But it is something that you want to share and you want others, because there is that hope in there. I think, again, it comes back to that. So
yeah, it opens us up to something new in our human experience. There
was one more thing I wanted to read here, and it was, again, it was in this letter to artists. So Pope Benedict is addressing artists. Through your art, you yourselves are to be heralds and witnesses of hope for humanity. And do not be afraid to approach the first and last source of beauty, to enter into dialogue with believers, with those who, like yourselves, consider that they are pilgrims in this world and in history towards infinite beauty. Faith takes nothing away from your genius or your art. On the contrary, it exalts them and nourishes them. It encourages them to cross the threshold and to contemplate with fascination and emotion the ultimate and definitive goal, the sun that does not set, the sun that illumines this present moment and makes it beautiful. I just thought of the sun, and how it comes and goes, but it's always there. It's always there. And when it does come out, it illumines things for us, and it's ever present. And it warms us up and it lights us up, right?
Yeah, you made me think of Tim Murphy.
Oh, yes, our friend.
A great local poet who passed away a few years ago. And And when you read that quote, he always would share how prolific he was when he was under the guidance of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
He said, poems are coming out every day, He said, I've wrote more poems in the last 2 years than I had in the last 20 or something,
Yeah, one of his last series, I think it was windshield poems or something, that he was on the way to Mayo and back, and just even that drive and letting his mind get cleared to be out. He was thinking of all sorts of things. And I remember going to visit him, and he would always have to share, like, I just wrote this poem last night, and you need to hear this. Like, he just delighted in that creation too, and the fact that he had helped be that vessel for God. And I think that's one of the things we're called to too, is as this document is exhorting artists to remember, that gift that they've been given. It is a gift, and something to delight in. So, anything else about beauty that we didn't go over that maybe you were thinking about in preparing for this that you would want people to know?
Yeah, I think beauty affects our gaze, and it invites us to gaze upon the other, who's ultimately God Himself, and what a great gaze that is, a gaze of awe and wonder, and that's the beginning of wisdom, is this place of awe and wonder, rather than, I think that's how beauty also saves the world, is it puts us in a posture of awe and wonder rather than a posture of control and manipulation of creation or of others or of anything, but invites us this place of awe and wonder, in which is a whole new posture of soul before reality.
It's kind of that image of the manger, the creche that we just were contemplating. And maybe that's something we can just encourage people to continue to gaze on that and to not let that go so soon. We want to get on with our lives and put our Christmas tree away really fast. But
to linger. I think beauty invites us to linger with things.
Yeah.
And to savor them.
And to take the time, and you were saying recently in a homily, to waste time, which is, I think, when you're sitting there, looking at a sunset or whatever, I could be doing something else.
You're not looking at your clock, asking the sunset to hurry itself up.
Yeah, you kind of lose yourself in that, which is beautiful. Well, thank you for this delightful conversation about beauty. It's not
thanks for the invitation.
Yeah,
I was
absolutely.
glad. It was a great topic. I was glad to be here with you today.
Yeah, you helped illuminate some things, and I really appreciate that. Would you offer a blessing to our listeners out there before we go?
Sure. We ask that the beauty of the Lord and the beauty of God might bless everyone and give them encouragement and hope, and lift us up from the trials and struggles of our daily life to new inspiration and new strength by the goodness of God revealed in the beauty He has created, both in nature and in grace. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father.
Peace be with you.
You too. Thank you so much. Can beauty save the world? I love the question, and I was surprised by the depth of the answer. I knew when I posed this to Father Meyer, I was throwing him a zinger. Where does one begin with such a question? But I had the sense, given the thoughtful homilies I've heard from him, that he would unearth something, beautiful. And in my opinion, he did not disappoint. The letter we discussed by Pope Benedict to artists really does seem to speak to the heart of this question. In that letter, you'll find a link to it in the show notes. Pope Benedict asked this: what is capable of restoring enthusiasm and confidence? What can encourage the human spirit to rediscover its path, to raise its eyes to the horizon, to dream of a life worthy of its vocation, if not beauty? Here's something else to consider. If God is beauty, truth, and goodness, and God saves, then from a spiritual perspective, yes, beauty, God Himself, can save the world. But we have a part to play too. First of all, in noticing beauty, and then bringing it to others who might have forgotten. Is it possible in this darkened world? Of course. Not because of anything we can manage, but because of who God is and what He desires, our salvation. If God is beauty itself, and God desires above all our salvation, then yes, beauty can save the world. So the next time you see a beautiful sunrise or watch a new mother gazing at her child, or pass by a stunning nature scene, or catch sight of a piece of art that draws you. Hold that in your heart and ponder how you might share that with others. In this, you are doing your part in spreading hope and giving a nod to the supreme artist, God Himself. I hope this episode has at some point caused your heart to leap a little, to consider how beauty can restore our souls. If you have a story of beauty to share, a guest to suggest, or just a comment to make, drop me a line through my website contact form at roxannesolonen.com. I'll return in a couple weeks with episode 4 when I ask guest Jody Clemens, is abortion really healthcare? I've heard Jody share about her own abortion experience on several occasions and have found her takeaways deeply insightful and moving. No matter where you land on this issue, I hope you'll join us for that conversation, which is sure to be thought-provoking for all. Until then, don't lose sight of the light.